Who is running our country? That's the question everyone is asking after a bombshell report from the Wall Street Journal blew the lid off Joe Biden's declining mental state and how the White House has been covering it up right from the very start. According to the Journal, signs that the commander-in-chief was diminished stretched all the way back to, quote, the first few months of his presidency, with aides adjusting his schedule, noticing Joe becoming tired if they went long, and he started making mistakes. So they kept meetings short and started controlling who he spoke with. And like a good little lapdog, the media aided and abetted the cover-up. Remember this lunacy?
F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second.
I'm not even going to ask a question on that. It's so absurd. Jesse, they say that the 50 sources say they noticed in the first few months that he couldn't handle things. But do you remember they're using COVID as an excuse for him not to campaign, not to get out there and to have the basement campaign where, remember, cars, they would beep if they supported Joe Biden? There were 8 of them.
Yeah, so they kept the COVID structure throughout the rest of the presidency. And he was treated like an aging dictator, an aging king. You know, the same things they said about Trump were true of him. He was isolated. He was out of touch. He was mentally unfit. People were keeping things from him. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't give him bad polling. They wouldn't give him bad headlines. He was AWOL during the lead up to Afghanistan. People were trying to get him on the phone at key moments. There's no way to get a hold of the guy. And he delegated his presidential powers to his staff, Judge. So when people ask, well, who's really the president? It was his staff. His staff were executing the duties of the president. And I think it was April 2021, right out of the gate, they were canceling meetings because he was having a bad day. So all this conspiracy theory about, Joe Biden shot, he's a puppet, it was true. I mean, at this point, we're going to find out he stole the election from Trump. At this point, the way things are going.
Jesse?
I'm just saying the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if we found that.
You know, the amazing part of it, Charlie, is that Jill Biden was in charge of the one cabinet meeting they had in 11 months. Jill Biden was the one who campaigned in 2020. She out-campaigned her husband, Joe. Jill Biden is the one that people had to go through to get to. Jill was one who they had to go through to get to Joe. Well, why was she so desperate for this?
I guess. I mean, we don't know, but I guess it was because she was desperate to cling to the White House and to remain relevant and remain in the White House, because we don't have any other better answer than that. Obviously, this is all Joe Biden's responsibility. He's the one that allowed this to happen. But she bears a lot of responsibility for allowing it to happen to her husband. It's embarrassing. It wrecks whatever legacy he might have had. He leaves office the most unpopular president in the history of polling. And I also think that, and I hope that the people that are around him that lied to him, lied to us, lied to everybody, and kept this Weekend at Bernie's charade going all this time, don't escape scrutiny, and people don't forget that what they did to us. They talk about destroying democracy and taking democracy away. Yeah. There's no greater example of destroying democracy and taking it away than actually having the person that got elected be. I mean, they lied to him about. They shielded him from outsiders. They lied to him even as late as the campaign. They were lying to him about his pollsters, about his polling. They wouldn't let him talk to his pollsters. So even he didn't have any idea how bad things were going into the summer. There's a lot of blame to go around for everybody. Joe Biden is most responsible, but I hope that nobody forgets that what these staffers did to undermine democracy.
You know, Dana, the interesting thing is that before Joe Biden spoke to this special counsel Robert Hur. For 1 week, he would spend 3 hours every day prepping. And the only thing that we got out of it was Hur said, this is a friendly guy, an elderly man with no memory. And this was the point where Putin goes into Ukraine, where Hamas attacks, where Joe was actually funding Iran, which is then funding Hamas. And it's one of the darkest periods in American history. And yet Joe is still there clinging to power in the last, 5 weeks or whatever it is. What do you think he's trying to do now?
I just had a thought that occurred to me, so let me just use my words here and see if I can get it out. When the Robert Hur report came out, do you remember there was a fury from the White House that Merrick Garland let it go out? And I have to wonder if Merrick Garland made sure it went out so that he at least would have been like, yeah, we're trying to tell people like this was what was happening. One of the things in the article is that they scripted his interactions with his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin. No wonder Biden had no idea Lloyd Austin was missing in action for 3 weeks. They never spoke anyway. And if they did, there was a script. It's not a call center. He didn't have a way to communicate directly with his Treasury Secretary. No wonder they never talked about inflation as a problem for Americans. You had the chief of staff saying it was a high-class problem. Then you think of those historians who would visit the White House, including writing speeches for Joe Biden, and telling him, you could be bigger than FDR. They weren't trying to have historical analysis. They were trying to make history with somebody who couldn't make his own decisions. Think of these people also. Annie Linsky of the Wall Street Journal wrote a piece 2 weeks before the debate between Biden and Trump, where the charade is exposed. And the White House came down on her like a ton of bricks. And she had said, I wrote this not because I wanted to hurt Joe Biden. It was more in sadness than in anything. I'm having to write this. I have 40 sources, and I'll never forget that. The spokespeople from the White House just trying to destroy her reputation and her life. What sweet justice for Andy Linsky and her co-writers there. The last thing I would say is Kamala Harris is absolutely complicit in the cover-up.
Exactly. And that's where I was going to Jessica. What happened in this White House was something that I don't think America has seen ever. We all knew what was going on. We sat at this table and actually thought about what was clearly the cognitive decline of a bobbling, dithering man. And then we were like, and Kamala's great and he's really great. I mean, is there anything about that you think, you would change in terms of the Democrat Party? Should they have done something? Should they do something now?
Well, I don't think there's anything to do right this second. I think strategy will obviously be different going into future elections. I think people are going to be much more skeptical of what they're being told by people that are close to candidates. I mean, this is someone who throughout his career has had a very tight inner circle, but the extremeness of that seems unprecedented from looking at this. And this article is going to be tough for people to ignore because it's so well sourced and reported. It's not someone saying I saw Joe Biden walked in the wrong direction or something, right? This is a lot of people, and they have a lot of people on the record, going in both directions of it. And Democrats saying things like, I think it was Senator Heinrich, that he spent more time with President Obama than he did with President Biden, and he was much less senior then, right? He just came in and Obama was giving him much more time. So there was obviously more of an openness to folks. But this is consistent with what I think a lot of people feel in the level of betrayal that Democrats, and myself included, underestimated that average voters feel about it. It's one thing to say these are the accomplishments, and I think a lot of people feel pretty positive about certain things that the administration did, but they wanted both, right? They wanted a candidate and they wanted the accomplishments together. And it's very clear that the Biden folks could have probably avoided a lot of this if he had dropped out a year in advance and said, we're going to have a primary. If Kamala is the winner, which I think is feasible, fine. If it's somebody else, that's good too. But you've been noticing as well as folks that worked on the campaign do interviews like on Pod Save America, or there was a forum and Jen O'Malley Dillon was there, and also Tony Fabrizio from Donald Trump's team, that they're not giving satisfactory answers to Democrats, that it feels like there's no apologies to be made. They keep saying, I wouldn't have done anything different.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. It's pretty awful. I think it's a very dark period in American history.